that Sanjeev?
Yes, it is. Do you want to check in or projected you, or?
I think I just did.
Yeah, it came on.
It came on? Okay, good. So then we're all set with that.
Sanjeev, may I say hello?
Hi, how are you? It's good.
Who I
I
am.
remember you.
I'm Susan Mulder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember. I remember you were, you got mad at me because I said there was no good Italian food in Santa Fe.
Oh.
I just gave you an option to find one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Family place.
Yeah.
Here, we'll talk to you the corner.
Okay. I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, hey, did you know I looked up? Me, and Colette, and Sasha, and how many people? It was, what's her name's class in the undergraduate program on text and image. This is chicken wild from my garden, and it's a Greek, an Egyptian. So I just wanted to tell you, usually I make donations to the MLA program. Oh Lord. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm so pissed because epidemiologists, we study that. Anyway, so I have to kind of wait till I see what is going to cost me, you know what I mean? And then I'll get back to operate for the scholarships, but I have to take. So I didn't want you to think I was.
I would never do that. Thanks so much.
Because it's always been high on my agenda, to give to them, but okay. But I heard the reading was great. And I hear Chip tells me all sorts of wonderful things about it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's true.
Oh, good.
So I'm really happy to hear.
Yeah. Always.
Well, you never know.
Right. No. Yeah.
As he said, I asked him. So I wish I could be involved a little bit more, but I have to wait for a while until it's.
We'll keep us. Let us know.
Oh, thanks.
What do you think?
Yeah, I just have
So
to.
we have a craft talk or whatever? Craft.
And then
Yes,
take
so we can,
yeah.
and,
Good
we
reason.
can do a confirmation bias.
That was kind of like the scariest
Implicit
part.
bias.
No, the scariest.
From a cumulative effect of additional stories.
Anyway,
I just came off
Hello. Good evening. Salutations and greetings, and welcome to the 2019 IAIA Summer Readers Gathering. I'm Santee Frazier, Director of the IAIA MFA program, and I welcome you all tonight. And I welcome also Cherie, Dimaline, who will be reading for us. And I also welcome Layli Long Soldier, who will be reading for us tonight. Really excited about this event. We are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube currently. So go ahead and open up your digital devices and let everybody know that we're doing that so we can get a lot of views and hearts and all of those things if you'd like. But then that might crash the Wi-Fi. I don't know how that's going to affect, IAIA internet connections, right? I apologize to the readers tonight. We've had IAIA water bottles all this week, but now we have to use the Fiji water because all of the other writers have stolen our water bottles. So we have this tonight. So I'd like to thank the Lannan Foundation for their generous support. I'm excited for tonight's reading. Without the generous support from the Lannan Foundation, we wouldn't have many writers. It was a large part of my education in the BFA program. Through that grant, I was able to learn from poets like Derek Walcott, Charles Simic, Louise Erdrich came here. One thing that about IAI is that these writers tend to let their guard down, right? Usually it's very sort of, in a lot of academic circles, the writers are very sort of, they protect themselves. But here at IAI, I remember Charles Simic being so generous in class, and also doing, individual student conferences all day, that kind of thing. But that's all through Lannan support. And if we could all just give the Lannan Foundation a round of applause before we get started. Now, just some sort of, MFA bits. I usually have the sermon ready, but today was an unusually sort of high traffic day, so I was standing back there talking to Layli while she was eating Doritos, writing these, and I think, so it's going to be a little short tonight. But I would like to acknowledge Lisa Tiger, who can't be with us this evening. She had to make a trip to Oklahoma for personal reasons, but I just want to acknowledge that she attends everything, participates in everything, generously and without complaint. And I really do think that she's one of our best students. And so if we could just give Lisa a round of applause. I also wanted to acknowledge our single mothers. I know it's hard to be away from your kids, but I'm glad you're here doing the work. I just wanted to say that this program allows many single mothers to earn an MFA degree. Many Native women sacrifice their careers to raise their children, often putting their degrees on hold for 20 years, right? And one of the values of this program is the opportunity to pursue a degree and in creative writing without having to uproot your family, right? And there are also many Native people from remote Native nations that can come here without having to move away from their elders and their families and that kind of thing. And that's really valuable, right? Because many of us come from places where we don't have institutions of higher learning readily available, right? And so this is one of the things that makes this program so unique. And I really love the sort of cultural exchanges that have been going on throughout the week from different cultures, different people from, all over, different indigenous people all over, North America and Canada. We don't have too many folks from Mexico yet, but maybe that'll change soon. We're gonna have to recruit down there. So with that, I would like to invite Zoe Johnson up to the stage to introduce Cherie.
Bonjour, Ani, Zoe Johnson, Indushan Akaz, Bawatingan Shnabe Ndao. Hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Johnson. I'm a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa in Michigan, not the Canadian side. There are two Sault Ste. Maries. And I'm a second-year fiction student here at the IAIA MFA program. And a little less than a year ago, during my first semester here, all of us students working with the luminous Ramona Ausubel read Cherie Dimaline's, sorry, people pronounce it 8 different ways, Dimaline's The Marrow Thieves Together, which birthed an ongoing discussion thread as we made our way through the book. And I'd like to read a little one of my baby grad student replies. The Marrow Thieves has been proving a particularly difficult read for me, I wrote. This is not to say Cherie's writing hasn't been absolutely breathtaking. I think that's part of why, to be honest. But The Marrow Thieves has been hitting me harder than most with equally difficult subject matter. Perhaps because of the explicitly reflected history of residential schools, which are all too hauntingly familiar to me. I've heard so many similar stories from my language teachers, from members of my extended family, from members of my tribal community. Apocalyptic and dystopian narratives, I think, are conceived and experienced uniquely by Indigenous peoples because of what we have and are still living in spite of. I think it goes to show, I continued, just how well Cherie has conveyed the horrors that our ancestors survived, especially those of us in the Great Lakes region and our Two-Spirit members, and has spooled out those past sufferings, casting them into a speculated future in a way that brings them all to the surface. Yet it also imagines a future where we Indigenous folks not only forge a way forward, but are a way forward. As we like to say back home, it was extremely Nishin. I realized very quickly, however, that these observations did not make me a particularly insightful reader, since the entire central point of Cherie's spectacular talk earlier today about speculative fiction was that entire thing, which she put way better than I did. She highlighted dystopian and apocalypse narratives' power to speak to and about situations difficult to address in the present, and how we as Indigenous peoples are a uniquely apt fit to tell these kinds of stories. We are a peoples that have lived through attempted genocide and apocalypse, she said, who better to write about them. And with the kind of fervor I've only seen the like of in high school state championship coaches, she stared into our fledgling writers' souls and declared of Indigenous writers, "We are the people of story. We have been telling stories since we have been. It's part of who we are." Cherie Dimaline is a member of the Georgian Bay Métis community in Ontario and has published 4 books. Her 2017 book, The Marrow Thieves, won the Governor General's Award and the prestigious Kirkus Prize for Young Readers, was a finalist for the White Pine Award, and was a selection for the CBC's 2018 Canada Reads. It was also named Book of the Year on numerous lists, including National Public Radio, the School Library Journal, the New York Public Library, Globe and Mail, Quill Enquirer, the CBC, and continues to be a national bestseller and has been translated into several languages. Cherie is currently working on a TV adaptation of The Marrow Thieves, launching her next novel, Empire of Wild, with Random House in September of 2019 and a US release through William Morrow in 2020, and is working on a new YA novel to be published in 2020 by Penguin Canada. Please join me in welcoming Cherie Dimaline.
Miigwech, thank you, Zoe. You are very Nishin. I'm incredibly honored to be here. They told me I was going to be reading with Layli Long Soldier, and then I was immediately intimidated. So I'm very happy to be going first, because I don't think I could read from the floor, which is where I will be when she is done. I wanted to say that sometimes the hardest job in our community is being an auntie or an uncle, and that's simply because you have to show up. You're obligated to show up. You have to fight. You have to show great gentleness and also great strength at the same time. You have to protect, and you also have to incite laughter. And because you're an auntie and an uncle, you're not often there. You're not always around to receive all the gratitude and to see the impacts of your work. And I think we need to be better at showing our gratitude. And so I wanted to say Chimigwech Wado to Santi Frazier for being such a good uncle for all of us here at IAIA. So about a year ago, I did a reading here and I read from the first draft of Empire of Wild. And I did that because I thought it would be really unfair of me to read a polished, edited piece of work after all of these students had read incredible, brilliant, brave drafts of their work. So tonight I'm going to read a polished, edited version of Empire of Wild, but then at the end I'll save just a minute to read one page from a first draft of a new work, the YA that's coming out. So this is the beginning of Empire of Wild. Just a very simple explanation is Joan is a Métis woman. Her husband has gone missing. She thinks she's found him in an evangelical mission tent, but he has no memory, and he's going by the name the Reverend Wolf. And she quickly realizes that the Rougarou is involved. And the Rougarou is a creature who lives in my community, and you'll hear about him in this prologue. Old medicine has a way of being remembered, of haunting the land where it was laid. People are forgetful. Medicine is not. The town of Arkand was a church, a school, a convenience store, a bootlegger, and a crowd of stooped houses leaning like old men trying to hear a conversation over a graveyard of Greniers and Trudeaus. Sundays were for God, though most people prayed out on the lake, casting Hail Marys with their fishing lines into the green water, yelling to the sky when they didn't get lucky or when they did. Parties were held in kitchens, euchre was a sport, and fiddles made the only sound worth dancing to. Any other music was just background noise for storytelling and beer drinking and flirting, or for providing the cadence for fight choreography when you just had to beat the shit out of your cousin. The people who lived in Arkand were brought from another place, moved off Drummond Island when it was handed over to the United States in 1828. They were half-breeds, the children of French voyageurs and First Nations mothers and Métis people who had journeyed from Manitoba. The new colonial authorities wanted the land, but not the Indians, so the people were bundled onto ships with their second-hand fiddles and worn soft boots. And they landed on the rolling white sands of the Georgian Bay and set up their new homes across from the established town that wouldn't welcome them. At first they were fine on their own, already flush with blacksmiths and hunters, fishermen, and 100 small children to toss stones into Lake Huron. If they had known then how each square inch would have to be guarded, how each grain of sand needed to be held tight, perhaps they would have stacked the rocks instead of gifting them to the lake. Over the years, without treaty and without wealth, the half-breeds were moved away from the shorelines where million-dollar cottages were built in a flurry of hammers on lumber, so many at one time it was as if the shore was standing to ovation. Family by family, the community was pushed up the road. Catholic by habit, they prayed on knees for the displacement to stop, for the Jesus to step in and draw a line between the half-breeds and the new people. Those amongst them who carried medicine also laid down coarse salt as protection against the movement. This salt came from the actual bones of one particular Red River family who drew their own boundaries when the hand of God did not reach down to do it for them. Eventually, inevitably, the shore belonged to the newcomers who put up boathouses and painted gazebos and built docks where sunburnt grandchildren would cannonball into June waters, calling for someone to watch what they could do. And the half-breeds, they got the small settlement up a dirt road. They got Arkand. Some of the people managed to hold on to the less desirable patches of waterfront, areas with no beach or too many lilies like the decaying fingers of a neglected woman pushing out of the muck. These were the older people who refused to head up the road to Arkand. They kept rickety docks where the fishermen tied their rusty boats in exchange for some of the catch. And the heavily wooded acres that bloomed out from Arkand towards the highway and the smaller roads with hairpin curves snaking down to the occupied shores, these areas too remained up for grabs. In any half-breed home, there were jars of coins and a wistful plan to buy back the land, 1 acre at a time if need be. On these lands, in both the occupied places and those left to grow wild, alongside the community and the dwindling wildlife, there lived another creature. At night, he roamed the roads that connected Arkand to the larger town across the bay, where Native people were still unwelcome 2 centuries on. His name was spoken in the low tones saved for swear words and prayer. He was the threat from 100 stories told by those old enough to remember the tales. Broke Lent, the Rougarou will come for you. Slept with a married woman, Rougarou will find you. Talk back to your mom in the heat of the moment, don't walk home. Rougarou will snatch you up. Hit a woman under any circumstances, Rougarou will call you family soon. Shot too many deer so your own freezer's overflowing but the herd thin? If I were you, I'd stay indoors. Rougarou knows by now. He was a dog, a man, a wolf. He was clothed, he was naked in his fur, he wore moccasins to jig. He was whatever made you shiver, but he was always there, standing by the road, whistling to the stars so that they pulsed bright in the navy sky, as close and as distant as ancestors. For girls, he was the creature who kept you off the road or made you walk in packs. The old women never said, "Don't go into town. It is not safe for us there. We go missing. We are hurt." Instead, they leaned in and whispered a warning. "I wouldn't go on the road tonight. Someone saw that Rougarou just this Wednesday leaning against the stop sign, sharpening his claws with the jawbone of a child." For boys, he was the worst thing you could ever be. You remember to ask first and follow her lead. You don't want to turn into Rougarou. You'll wake up with blood in your teeth, not knowing and no way to know what you've done. And long after the bone salt carried all the way from the Red River was ground to dust, after the words it was laid down with were not even a whisper, and the dialect they were spoken in was rubbed from the original language into common French, the stories of the Rougarou kept the community in its circle, behind the line. And when the people forgot what they had asked for in the beginning, a place to live and the community to grow in a good way, he remembered, and he returned on padded feet, light as stardust on the newly paved road, and that Rougarou, heart full of his own stories but his belly empty, he came home not just to haunt, he also came to hunt. Chapter 1, Joan of Arcand. Searching for the one you lost feels like dying of exposure again and again. You are bloodless, single-minded, numb around the edges of the panic and loss. Fingers exist only to dig, legs to pump you forward on blistered feet. You look, you look, you look. You push granola bars between your teeth to get some fuel into your stomach so you can keep going. You piss in the woods to save time, but only after meticulously checking the ground for evidence. You hold your breath when you spot tracks, and then you follow them. Any small sign that he may be close slams electricity into your nerves so that everything is on fire. You are a fever in the woods. But then a broken shoelace is just a shoelace and nothing more. A clue is not a clue, just a dropped barrette, a drunken stranger sleeping it off, a used condom. And your blood recedes like a red tide, and your fingers close tight around another shitty cup of coffee. And they rest over a broken heart held careless by inadequate ribs. And you look some more. Joan had been searching for her lost husband for 11 months and 6 days since last October, when they'd fought about selling the land she'd inherited from her father. And he'd put on his gray jacket and walked out, the screen door banging behind him. She'd pored over that small sequence of movements and words every hour for 11 months and 6 days until the argument had distilled to a scream and a dash, then the door. Going to check the traps, he'd thrown over his shoulder into the living room where she sat. "Yeah, good," she tossed at his back from the couch. "Go enjoy the land you want to sell out from under us. Why not?" Then she'd half laughed through her nose so that the last sound he heard was her derisive, mocking exhale. This was the punctuation at the end of their collective sentence, this horrible noise. Maybe he hadn't heard her. She hoped that he hadn't. She couldn't remember what it was to eat and sleep and dream. She couldn't make herself come, and she couldn't ease her lungs enough to sigh, which she thought was almost the same thing. Without Victor, Joan was half erased. Was he dead somewhere? Had he run off? She couldn't grieve like a normal person, cut her hair, cry herself to sleep, and wait for a day when she could live with his absence. The only thing she could do was search. Arcand had a way of slipping itself around a person and applying subtle pressure so that you settled back into its groove, somewhat conscious of being swaddled, but mostly comfortable with it. In the beginning of their relationship, bringing Victor home was not easy. Like any small community, Arcand demanded familiarity and loyalty. It pushed outsiders out like splinters, and it tried its best to eliminate Victor in this way. And when her father died, the house she'd grown up in was handed down to Joan. Her mother couldn't stand to be there anymore, and between her and her brothers, Joan was considered the most in need of stability. Since it had been sitting empty when she had a Newfoundland fling, Joan had moved her mare, her grandmother, from her apartment to the house, which meant the first obstacle she and Victor had to face was her grandmother, Angelique. Not generally judgmental, Angelique was moody when worried, and Joan's track record with men definitely caused her to worry. Her reaction to Victor's sudden appearance took the form of silence, which Joan tried hard to break. Victor's father's a bushie. Didn't you know some bushies back in school? Victor likes to hunt, and you should tell him about the deer that used to be around here when Grandpa was around. Hey, me and Victor are going to town for groceries. You want us to bring you to bingo? Most of Joan's overtures were met with mumbling, half in mischief. Joan only understood enough to know that none of them were real responses. Mare spent more and more time in the silver Airstream she'd parked out back down by the creek, the place where she kept her medicines and best tea set and liked to do her puzzles. Eventually, she started spending nights in the trailer. And finally, she stopped coming up to the house for anything but to shower and use the landline. But Victor refused to give up. He baked bread and carried it down to the trailer wrapped in a checkered dishcloth. He invited Merritt for cards every time they were about to play. He landscaped the whole property and planted sage by the birch trees. Only when he told her a dick joke while she watered the garden did she finally begin to relent. Merritt liked a good dick joke and appreciated a man who could tell one. Her brothers and mother were less measured in their show of disapproval. The first time she brought Victor over for Sunday dinner at her mom's, her brother George took his plate of shake and bake to sit in front of the TV. Junior went to the workroom, and Flo out on the porch. Joan was hurt and embarrassed, but not surprised. She'd wasted their goodwill on a lot of goofs over the years. Now here she was with the person she was going to marry, the man who was where she finally fit in the world, and they were refusing eye contact. And this went on for months. Victor held her when she cried about it gently, like her bones were broken just under the skin. He said, "I'm a stranger to them. Of course they're overprotective." But she knew it was getting to him too. They weren't being overprotective. They were being assholes. She went back to work with the family contracting crew, but was silent while they shingled roofs and sullen when they put in decks. She started calling her mother once a week instead of daily and showing up for dinners and baptisms even less. The stalemate ended in their second winter when Junior got into a fight at Commodore's over someone calling someone an Indian, and then a bottle was broken on the edge of a table. Victor had stopped in at the bar after work with a new guy on his framing crew. When the shouting began, he excused himself and ran toward the fight, shedding layers of flannels as he went. And he threw down for Junior without question, popping jaws, taking a kick to the ribs, yanking raised pool cues out of calloused hands. And then the police showed up and shooed everyone home. He and Junior rolled up in George's truck at 3 a.m. on a snowy Saturday morning. Then all three staggered to the house, arms around each other. Joan opened the door and Victor beamed so big it was clear he'd lost an incisor to a fist of heavy knuckles. It was also clear that he and her brothers had become buds for life. It was a good thing Mare was down in the Airstream. She would have beat them black and blue just for getting beat up. All in all, it was worth the cost of the dental implant. Victor grew on people, one by one, especially after the wedding when it was clear he intended on sticking around. The first week, he didn't come home. Everyone looked for him. Even Marcel, the logger, went out to search the woods, even though he was the one who famously carried the tip of Victor's tooth permanently embedded in his right hand after the fight at Commodore's. But by the end of the second month, it was only Joan wandering the township like a broken-hearted ghost. There were days she couldn't remember how she got to her patch of land or out to the dump. She just ended up there, putting one foot in front of the other down narrow paths and over mounds of wrecked furniture and wet newspaper. 11 months and 6 days, and she was still a distracted driver, checking out every person walking down the side of the road, looking in each car that passed, or else so lost in thought, so tired she was prone to drift. Even ferrying Mare and her cousin Zeus to Sunday dinner at her mother's house, she was caught up in her thoughts. "Dude, Joan, pull over," Mare shouted. "We can walk the rest of the way to your mom's." She was braced for impact, holding onto the dashboard with two hands, her top-handled purse propped up on her lap like a small white dog. Her seatbelt was pulled tight over her low breasts, her back straight against the seat. "I'm not ready to see the Jesus just yet." And Zeus him, his voice hasn't even cracked. From the back seat, Mayor's great-grandson chimed in, "Don't kill a player before he's even got into the game, Auntie." Sorry, guys. Joan sat up and put both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, steering the Jeep back over the yellow line and firmly into their lane. She'd been thinking about the ditch on the side of Highway 11 between Barrie and Aurelia. Had she checked both sides? Might be worth another trip out. "Long summer this year," Mayor remarked, watching the sailboats in the bay out her window. They cut slow across the dark water like children gliding on an ice rink, all pastel coats and white toques. "They call this Indian summer, Mayor, when it goes on into October," Zeus remarked. "Who does?" Mayor craned around to frown at him. "Who?" I don't know, they do," he shrugged. "Who's that then?" She loosened her belt and shifted her bum so she could turn to stare at him. Just them, Mayor, people." "Wow, what does that even mean, Indian summer? Can't be nothing good if they are saying it." She turned back to the front, crossing her arms over her chest. "Well," Joan said, "I mean, there's such a thing as a white Christmas, so maybe fair's fair." Mayor folded her hands over her purse. "You could be right." She clucked her tongue and looked back out the passenger window. "Might all be part of this reconciliation thing." Joan caught her little cousin's eye in the rearview mirror, and they shared a smirk. Florence Beausoleil's house was small and tidy like its owner. Joan's mother was barely 5 feet tall and steel-toes, but she ran the construction crew herself, each member of whom she had given birth to. She didn't stay in the office, neither. At 60, Flo was the fastest on the roof, jumping joists like a rabbit through clover. She could eyeball blueprints and see a finished project in 3 dimensions in the void. And with 12-year-old Zeus, an ancient mare, along with her 2 brothers, an energetic mother, converging in one modest space, Joan was claustrophobic as soon as she'd taken her shoes off at the front door. She squeezed onto the love seat beside her older brother in the room left by her mother's ridiculous collection of overstuffed pillows. He was watching the tiny TV their mother refused to replace, as it might compel her boys to stay in the nest even longer. "Jesus, Junior, when are you getting your own place?" "Don't know. When are you going to take a shower?" She rammed her shoulder into him, and he lifted his arm across the back of the couch, pulling her in and dropping a kiss on the top of her head, his eyes never leaving the game. It would be nice to be somewhere where we could smoke something other than weed. Meat other than meat? You know what I'm saying? I live in Vancouver. Santi, aren't you glad this is live streamed? God, I love this place. Woo! All right. Joan tried to speak low, jabbing a finger into his newly soft gut, but in my defense, here's this part. "Weeds are legal now." "Why you gotta be all whispery over there? Gladys Trudeau uses it for her bad hip, and Jean, she's been smoking pots for years." Mare said this from the kitchen, where she was peeling carrots with a thin knife and plunking them into the giant enamel stew pot. "I think I might get some next time Junior drives me into the pharmacy for my pills." "Holy fuck, Junior, you better not get Mare drugs." Her brother just laughed and shrugged, like I can control her. Flo was carving up a thawed slab of moose, frying the cubes in a greased pan, and the meat spit and hissed like a quick temper. "Hey, did you know it's Michif summer?" Mare asked her daughter. "How's that?" Flo asked. "Indian summer, Mare, Indian summer," Zeus corrected. He was at the counter mixing up some Kool-Aid. "Well, hell, I gotta have a status card just to have a long summer now?" Mare glared at him. "Half-breeds like the sun too, you know." Zeus stirred in the powdered crystal in silence. I'm gonna stop there because I want to read something from the new work. I think this is in honor of those students, especially our first years. Who did you all sign up for your reading? I hope. Who do that hard work of putting things out and up for criticism and love, lots of love. So this is from the new YA book that will be published next year. It's called Funeral Songs for Dying Girls, and this is from the first draft. And it's again, in a nutshell, it's a love story between 2 girls, one of whom is alive and lives with her father, who runs the crematorium in a cemetery, and the other girl, who is deceased, is one of the missing and murdered Indigenous women from our community. So this is one page. Sleep was evasive. but I refused to fill the hours with anything other than a gentle swing in the hammock, counting the cracks on the ceiling until they jumped and snapped into the patterns in my head. I once read a story about a man who grew a fig tree out of his stomach. He had joined the Turkish resistance in the 70s, but was captured and imprisoned in a hillside cave along with 2 other men. In a show of power, or maybe just being lazy in their work, his captors tossed in a stick of dynamite, throwing the men against the walls, tearing one to pieces, blasting a hole in the side of the cave. And the man's family searched for him for 4 decades, never knowing about the small fireworks that whisked him away. Decades later, a researcher who was wandering the mountains taking in the local flora noticed what appeared to be a fig tree growing on the side of a hill. He was intrigued. Figs didn't usually grow in this region. He approached and saw that it had followed the light and emerged out of a hole in the rock, directly inside an old cave with no entrance. He examined the tree, taking photos, drawing sketches of growth patterns and bark markings. Finally, perplexed, he decided to dig into its roots, and there he found the skeleton of the resistance fighter who had all those years before been imprisoned in the cave, but only after he had stopped to eat a fig, unaware this was his last act of resistance. That seed in his stomach grew, and nourished by the decay of its host and spurred on by the spotlight of sun, had extended its woody arms towards the sky in one last long hallelujah. His family was so relieved to have found his grave, to know where his bones rested, curled fetal around the circulatory system of roots. I assume they kept the tree, wondering, like I did, if their brother's DNA was twisted into the bark, if each leaf that bloomed from a tightly spun bud was a word pushed from their deceased lungs, plucked from memory. In that way, they only had to wait for autumn to sit underneath and debate politics with him in a flurry of leaves, or to catch enough of them, 3 to be exact, to hear, "I love you." Even in death, we do the work of being found. Chimigwech, thank you so much.
Osio, I'm Vivian Carroll, Cherokee Nation. Can you hear me? I'm short. It is my honor to be standing before you this evening to introduce Layli Long Soldier. I first became aware of Layli during a symposium titled Shedding Skins, Reconstructing Our Relationship to Art, held at Machna on September of 2014. I had no idea who this slim young woman was, but when she was introduced, I thought, whoa, what a cool name. In 2012, 5 years before the 2017 publication of her award-winning poetry collection, Whereas, Layli curated an art show, Whereas We Respond, at the Red Cloud Heritage Center in Pine Ridge. Copies of the Congressional Resolution of Apology to Native Americans were distributed, and visitors wrote or drew their responses on the Heritage Center walls. The exhibit walls were then symbolically obliterated with whitewash. When writing part 2 of the poetry collection, which includes whereas statements, resolutions, and disclaimers, Layli said, in answer to a poetry workshop question, that she intentionally visualized President Obama because it was he who signed the document. Layli is a visual artist as well as poet. One of her early installations featured a herd of buffalo made from wire mesh. Thinking visually is important to Layli. She says, as writers, we are visual artists working with a page. The form of our writing, the way words are arranged on a page, using spacing, font size, or a prose block, communicates even before the text is read. During a craft talk discussing circular narration, where closure is achieved through a return to a work's opening scene, Layli's curiosity created new writing structures on the spot. What if I didn't close the circle, she asked? Would my writing look like a spiral? What if my writing created two half circles? Layli prefers to read poetry from a sincere place, reading from the inside out, as if bringing someone along saying, look at this with me. This evening, she will bring some of her new work to share with you. Before our applause welcomes Layli Long Soldier to the podium, I'd like to perform a spiraling bit of circular narration by not quite tying this introduction to the opening paragraph. When I received my BFA from IAIA in spring of 2018, Layli gave the commencement address. I gave the undergraduate remarks. In a few moments, she and I will again grace the same stage. Please welcome visual artist and poet with a cool name, Layli Long Soldier.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me, first of all? Yeah? It's okay. Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. And it is really such a pleasure, a joy to be here with all of you and to have been able to spend time with some of the students yesterday in one of our two classes, a joined class. I am an alumni of IAIA, and so this place is very, very special to me. What else? I had all these things to say, but I can't remember them now. I've been housebound for maybe 6 or 8 weeks now with healing an injury, a back injury. So this is my first public event after some time, so it feels like kind of I'm being born into the world now. And I feel a little wobbly too, you know. Tonight, first of all, also I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Santi, congratulate Santi on a beautiful job as new director of this program. He is also an alumni of IAIA, and also to acknowledge Jennifer Forrester in the work that she's doing to transition and change hands in that. So I've watched them work together, and it's such a beautiful process, so yay! They're being all humble about it. Also, at this moment, I also wanted to acknowledge the U.S. Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo, who is also an alumni of IAIA. It's a very special place, and this is a very special time, right? I don't know about some of you, but when I heard the news, I just, oh my God, the whole day was glowing, right? It was just amazing news. So I wanted to start I wanted to actually read a poem by her, by Joy Harjo. We'll start off the evening with that. This is a poem titled Eagle Poem. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And I know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments, steadily growing, and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky, in wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion, like eagle rounding out the morning inside us. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. Oh, I love that poem. Yay, let's say yay for Joy Harjo. Okay, so I spent a little time with the class yesterday, and one of the things I said is that I'm getting tired of reading my whereas poems. I'm ready to read other things, only because there's a particular emotional place and a state that any of our works are written in, right? And so sometimes I don't always want to revisit those places. However, for tonight, I am going to read a few pieces I thought that are not from the response to the congressional apology, but from the first section of the book. And these pieces I wrote while I was a student here. So that's maybe in honor of this place and the spirit of it, right? Alsops. It's the best, right? This is a piece titled Edge, and this piece I remember specifically as a moment in my undergrad when my poetics, my writing really changed. So I started to trust the language a little more, and that was a very exciting time for me. So, Edge. This drive along the road, the bend, the banks, behind the wheel, I am called Mommy. My name is Mommy. On these drives, the sand and brush, the end of winter we pass. You in the rear view, double buckled, back center, my love. Your mother's mouth has a roof. Your mother's mouth is a church, a hut in a field, lone standing. The thatched roof has caught spark, what flew from walls, the spark apart from rock, from stable meaning. Large cars steady at the curve, palest light, driest day, a field of rocks. We are not poor, sealed in windows. You hum in the back. I do not know what to say, how far to go, the winter near dead. As we drive, you do not understand word for word. The word for you is little. But you hear how it feels always. The music plays, you swing your feet, and I see it, I, mommy, the edge. But do not point, do not say look. As we pass the heads, gold and blowing, these dry grasses, eaten in fear by man and horses. I want to say this was inspired by the drive from the, the highway? You know that road that comes out to campus? It's kind of curvy and there's a bunch of dry grass out there. That's what I was thinking of. Okay. I'm going to read another piece also from my time here at IAIA. This one is titled Talent. My first try, I made a hit. It dropped from morning gray, the smallest shadow, both wings slipped inward. Mid-flight, the man barked, "Now!" I shot again and again, a third time with each arrow through the target. I thought, was it luck or skill? Excuse me, was it luck or was it skill? Luck or skill as the last one fell. Its awkward shape made me run there, pulsing on the ground. I was surrounded, I was astounded. Hey, my eyesight's terrible, just so you know. And I lost my real glasses somewhere on the road, so I'm wearing these like Target glasses or something like that. Okay. Its awkward shape made me run. There, pulsing on the ground, I was astounded by its size. A gangly white goose throbbed, heaved its head. My eyes dropped. Blood flowers opened in the snow of its neck. Behind my shoulder, stepping down from a yellow bus, children made their way across the field. I shot once more to end it quickly. Close range, its death. Did I do this to spare the bird from suffering, or to spare the children the sight? My motives in humid cold, yes, my knuckles in the cold, steamed bright red. Because on my stomach, in grass, in rubber boots, pockets and vest, I slid along with that hunter. I did as he directed. From quiver, my draw, my black lashes in steely-eyed release, it felt good there. It felt strong. My breath in autumn was an animal there. I thought, did I really do this? Did I? Really? Yet, what difference does it make? What difference is muscle, is an arrow powered upward, or any flight to center, when I did not hear it, though I clearly mouthed, poor thing, poor thing, poor thing. Last one from that time period. Let. In this hour, a seal upon the body. From this body, the legs of tears running. In our legs, strain of a harness. With the strain, white gauze of cloud cover. In these clouds pitch and yaw the fletching of arrow. At the arrow, temple and brow. On our brow, the twine of words. In each word, our mother, our mother. As our mother's blood and letting. As we let, the field is open. What is opened? The quiet of a doe. As a doe, we eat with our heads down. In our heads, in our heads. Thank you. That is all I will be reading from Whereas. Yeah. I didn't go there. We'll let the Congress have some peace tonight, right? Just leave them alone. I'm going to share some new work, and it's not new. Actually, it's work from the last 2 years. And these are pieces that I've been kind of tinkering with, revising little by little. So some of you have actually seen some of these images already. Some of you, if you were at the Lannan reading, I think we had a class visit maybe a year ago or so. So I shared some of these images. Here we go, yeah. But I'm also going to read some of the pieces from this work. Okay. I want this to be a reading, but it's going to be slightly a reading / lecture. But I'm going to try not to talk too much, okay? But I do have to explain. So I'm going to read some poems from an exhibit titled Midakuye Oyasin. And this was an exhibit that I participated in with 2 other Lakota artists who also happen to be alumni of IAIA as well. Wow. So what we were interested in doing was Midakuye Oyasin. How many have heard that expression? Yeah, a lot of people. So what they were interested in doing, or what we were interested in, but it was really Mary and, I'm sorry, I should have said their names, Mary and Clementine Bordeaux. They were interested in sort of exploring this phrase a little bit more, which is roughly translated to we are all related, or all my relatives. And it's this idea of relationship and relationships sort of at the core of Lakota values. So they wanted to explore this a little more because it is an expression that has been adopted by a lot of people. Intertribally, you'll hear people who are not even Lakota kind of saying this. They'll stand up publicly, say a prayer, and end it with this. So a lot of people use that, the idea of being relatives or being related, not always understanding the deeper meaning and maybe the fuller context for where that comes from in Lakota culture. So part of that was really important, especially to Mary and Clementine, was the idea of responsibility to one another. So what a lot of people seem to be doing was to use that phrase to create familiarity. Hey cousin, hey brother, hey sister, and so on. But really not understanding that if you're agreeing to be a relative, there are also responsibilities that we have to one another. So being a sister, being an auntie, being a cousin, there's things you do to express that, right? It's not just, you don't get a free pass. So what we did was, Clementine is a documentary film artist. So she interviewed 6 women in our community who are all speakers. Mary worked with sculpture, 3D stuff, and I wrote poems. But at the same time, I wanted to work visually as well. So what I did is, do you guys know what a star quilt is? Okay. I'm really bending over. I feel like I'm getting lower and lower. I don't need to do that, right? Okay. So you know what a star quilt is. Yes, I see a lot of yeses. Okay, great. So I had a relative, one of my cousins gave me a star quilt pattern one time, and I do not sew. So I was like, thank you. And I just put it to the side. But the pattern sat in my room for a long time, like in my desk area, and I could always see it, and it was really kind of tapping me on the shoulder or saying, hey, I'm over here, and I'm here to do something with it, to be used. So this exhibit came along, and I saw this pattern in my room, and I decided, oh my goodness, I think this is the time to use it. So what I did was I took that pattern and I expanded the each diamond in the pattern to 1 foot long, and then so this is 1 foot. This is a heavy cotton paper from India. And then I sewed those diamonds together with copper wire, and I laser cut the text, the poems, into each diamond, or yeah. So when it was all put together, Santi, the stars were about 12 feet high by 12 feet wide when everything was said and done. So this black one is titled Obligations, and the colorful one is titled Mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are our relatives too, like it or not. They're around. There's even some in this room. You know who they are. They're our relatives anyway. Okay. All right, so the black one was laser cut, and then the colorful one was stencil work. So next one. So you can see some of the stencil work. I would like to credit my daughter. She also helped with this. I do child labor sometimes, force her, help mommy on my deadlines. Okay. Just quickly, because I probably used my whole 30 minutes by now, and I didn't even read the poems. So just quickly, I'm going to show you a couple. The next, Santi, sorry. Here's Mary, 2 of her sculptures. One is a buffalo skull. The other one is a rock. They're suspended from the ceiling. And when you come into the exhibit, you could put those on your head. Inside the sculpture, there you go, are little TV screens, and you can see some of the community members and their interviews talking about Midakoye Oyasin and what it is to be a relative. And also she put in the skull, there's sage, so that you can smell and see and listen. And in the rock, I think she put sweetgrass. And same thing you can see. Next. Here's a porcupine Mary made. It has a speaker. inside it, it's hanging on the wall, and you have to go really close to it, and the porcupine will tell you what it is to be a good relative. So you have to behave and listen really well. So that's inside the rock. Rocks are our relatives, you know. And that's one of the community members there. Okay. Oh, yeah, yay! on this side is Clementine Bordeaux, and this side is Mary. Mary also founded the.
Bordeaux is a port city on the Garonne in the Gironde department in southwestern France.
Oh my gosh, Santi, your iPad is talking about Bordeaux. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I did. That was funny. Okay, so just one last note. Mary actually founded the first Lakota-owned gallery and studio space in Rapid City, called Racing Magpie. So if you go to Rapid City, you might love visiting that space and seeing the work there. So that's pretty exciting. Okay. I'm going to finally, after all that, I'm going to read you some pieces. So you'll see the form. This was what was laser cut into the diamonds that were sewn together. And I made it so that the way it's read is you start at the top and you can weave your way down and make your own poem in any direction. And hopefully make a whole bunch of different ones. What I want, gosh, see, it's a whole lecture. Here we go. Anyway, just one last note. All of these, I want to credit all of the women that were interviewed in our community. They are the ones Clementine sent me the audio clips, and I sat and listened to those, took notes. So all of these pieces are inspired by the speakers in our community, and so I want to credit them and thank them. As we embrace the future, we work to understand the grief. We shift into light across our faces. As we embrace the present, we struggle to find the grief. We wield into light across our faces. As we resist the present, we begin to unbraid the grief. We wield as ash across our faces. As we resist the past, we fail to accept the grief. We wield as ash across our faces. As we resist the past, we fail to question the grief. We bury as ash across our faces. Each of these sound clips, often the speakers were addressing particular subjects. I remember this is one where someone was talking about intuition, which was so beautiful to me. And so, and the previous poem, you know, obviously there was this idea of grief. As I hope to speak my heart, I remember to sing as a child, to understand these are stories. As I hope to speak my tongue, I long to sing as a child, to understand these are stories. As I hope to change my eyes, I pause to sing as a mourner, to understand these are stories. As I cease to believe my eyes, I pause to sing as a mourner, to understand these are stories. As I cease to believe my intuition, I continue to sing as a mourner, to endure these are stories. As I cease to believe my intuition, I forget to sing as a soldier, to endure these are stories. I'm actually going to skip this one for the next one. Okay. I really enjoyed listening to someone, that this was inspired by someone who was talking actually about our dictionary, Lakota dictionary, and some of the politics that actually go into creating dictionary, people coming into our communities. And there's a lot that goes into who collects information, how things are copyrighted, who sells what, who teaches what, who, and so on. And so it was very interesting. And I'd heard certain things from my own family, and then I heard it affirmed through also some of these audio clips. So yeah, that was really interesting. This year, we held close our traditions to guard our family's future. An unwritten poem, birthing us, the body. This year, we held close our new dictionary to determine our land's future. An unwritten poem, birthing us, the body. This year, we strained against our new dictionary to examine our community's future, labor pains, birthing us, the body. This year, we strained against law and treaty to examine the Ocheti Shakoin future, labor pains, birthing us, the body. This year, we strained against law and treaty to redress our country's future, a splitting tree trapping us, the body. Geez, I bet I'm going over time. I hope I'm not. Am I okay? Yes? Okay. Okay, I'm going to read a few poems now, also from the quilt. But this is from the colorful one. And those pieces are taken, what we might call found poems, from a short story written by Zint Kalasha. Are you guys familiar with her? If you are not, and you're in this writing program, look her up. You better know it. She is a Dakota writer. She lived 1876 to 1938. Okay. And what I did was I looked at, here's another photo. Isn't she beautiful? So inspiring. So what I did was, there's a short story titled The Widespread Enigma of Blue Star Woman. And I took that story apart with the parts of speech. I separated out verbs, nouns, adjectives, all of those parts of speech. And what I found was really interesting. I found that when we strip away all of the maybe particulars of that era or that particular story, I found that the language used to talk about identity, issues of enrollment, issues of blood quantum or nearing that, surrounding that, rights, all of that is the same. 100 years ago, the same language that we're using today, and how we are looking at each other and how we are understanding ourselves as Native people. So I felt this was very interesting and very important to the exhibit also, as we considered this idea of relationship and relatives. So I'm going to read a couple pieces from that. Right, again, it's titled Mosquitoes, the 8 poems. Who am I was no longer the obsessing riddle of her life. The morning taught deep abstraction. I am a being. In its center, an answer to who were your parents. Any of you trying to get tribal enrollment, you'll be familiar with this. Who am I was no longer the persistent question. Her inquiry prompted deep abstraction. I am Blue Star Woman. In its center, an answer to who were your parents. Who am I had become the persistent question. Unwritten law held deep abstraction. I am Blue Star Woman. Be that as it may, the government means who were your parents. Who am I had become proof of membership in the tribe. Unwritten law required deep abstraction. A piece of earth is my birthright. Be that as it may, the government means who were your parents. Who am I had become proof of membership in the tribe. The white man's law disregarded deep abstraction. a piece of earth, is my birthright. Be that as it may, the government means who were your parents. Okay. The fact was, circumstances of her early childhood were matters of dispute, as the sharpened names from her tribe boiled like smoke-blackened coffee, fire between her and her heritage. The fact was, circumstances of her family tree were unrecorded, as the speared names from her tribe, boiled like smoke-blackened coffee, fire between her and her heritage. The fact was, verbal reports about her family tree were contradictory, as the lifted names of her memories boiled like smoke-blackened coffee, fire between her and her heritage. The fact was, verbal reports about old teachings were of far greater importance, as the roused names of the dead boiled like the hot bread's tsing, fire between her and her heritage. Okay, I know I'm probably over time. I'm doing this as, oh, thanks, that'll be it for the star quote stuff. I wanted to add this quickly, guys, for the students I visited with in the class, okay? This is just because we talked about it. This idea of being able to write pieces, poems 100% in our language. I wanted to show you what we did. I taught a class, co-taught a class with my auntie Tilda, Long Soldier. She taught the Lakota language portion, and I taught the poetry portion. And so I'm only sharing this because I want you to be able to think about it and go home and make your own lesson plans. And maybe even co-teach with a speaker in your community, and maybe sit down at your desk and write 100% in your own language. It can be done. The goal was every student in that class would leave after 2 hours and have a whole poem. So I'm going to show you how we did it. The one thing I'm going to apologize for is I don't have my own translation of this, the Lakota translation, and there's a reason, but let me move on. We worked with these constraints. First, we had 4 statements, all in present tense, all first person I. Okay? So we opened up the class and we said, we have constraints. All artists have constraints. If you're a bead worker, you don't have every darn bead that was created. You have your own little collection, right? You have to work with what you have. So if you are learning your native language, you have to work with what you have. You do not have to be fluent in order to make something beautiful. Okay, next one. So here's the 4 statements. Auntie taught us how to say, I have blank. Fill in the blank with a body part. I have 2 hands. And that, you can fill it in yourself with whatever you want. But here's examples. I have 2 hands. I have an injured foot. I have a weak eye. I have dirty fingernails. Second statement, I do not have blank. Fill it in with daily objects, clothing, or tools. I do not have a cup. I do not have a bowl. I do not have white paper. I do not have a sharp knife. And you could go on and on, right? Okay, next one. Third statement, I want, and fill that in with abstract terms. And Auntie said we can't do this in Lakota language. So I have to figure out what to do now with this section. We can't have abstractions with I want, so I have to tweak this, but we'll figure it out. I want quiet. I want the unknown. I want love. I want dignity. Last statement, I carry, and fill that in with natural elements, animals or plants. I carry a river. I carry a cricket. I carry the sky. I carry a stone. Now add conjunctions, and or but, and we'll close with this poem. Combining all of those simple statements, present tense, first person. I want quiet. I carry a stone. I want the unknown. I carry a cricket. I want love, but I have a weak eye. How many of you have that too? Oh my God, it's a problem, right? Anyway, I want dignity, but I have an injured foot. I do not have white paper or a sharp knife, but I have 2 hands and dirty fingernails. I carry a river, but I do not have a cup. I carry the sky, but I do not have a bowl. Thank you. Welcome back.
Beautiful reading. Audience members that have come from the public, you're going to have to forgive us tonight. We're doing our group photo this evening. So we're going to all walk out to the Performing Arts building there in the courtyard, and we're going to do sort of a drone shot. So I will need faculty, MFA students, staff, and BFA alumni if you're here. MFA alumni, do we have alumni here? Yeah, it looks like there's a few right there. So I'd like for us to go out this door, and there'll be there's a courtyard up there. We're going to do a drone shot. And audience members, there are books in the lobby. If you just wait a little while for us, we'll come back. I'm sure Layli would be happy to sign your book. Sorry about that. I'm just going to get everybody corralled up right now, or it won't happen. All right. Come on, everybody. Out the door.
and I wanted to say thank you for being willing to teach this coming, year. So I think
Don't
Parker's
mean
reading.
to
No,
keep
go, 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 go. You guys go.
No, you too.
No, I don't do
No,
push-ups.
you're alumni.
I don't like, I'm not.
You're
a pusher.
alumni. You're coming.
Yeah, well, I can come, but I gotta go, I know.
When is your book Layli going to come out?
No, it's not me, let's be somebody else. That's great, yeah. Thank you. really nice.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's definitely not as hard on the eyes
Yeah.
as it used to be.
Projector is.
The projector's better. I was
Huh.
asking back there, she said, oh, go ahead and turn that off. Because I think they're done.
Yeah.
Are you sleeping?
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Did I tell you I'm doing?
Uh-uh.
I'm ghostwriting a memoir.
You're ghostwriting a memoir.
Yeah. Writing someone else's memoir.
Is it like top secret?
It is. The person is. And
The person's
the general
top secret.
subject is standing on
Oh, okay.
political culture.
Cool, John.
Yeah.
Keeping busy.
Yeah, keeping very busy.
That's awesome. Well, that's good news.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to get work of various kinds, and nothing was happening, and I gave up. Because I don't know where you can like input calls and stuff.
Right
It's
on.
really weird.
That's
So I'm
what
not going to
happens.
try anymore. I'm just not going to try.
That's what happens though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you probably have that too.
I,
Get all the work at once.
that's what happened this week, or this
Yeah,
month. It's
yeah.
just been insane. I have like 5 different deadlines.
Yeah.
And I got it, and here I did the scholarship video, and they keep adding more stuff.
Oh,
Alex
right.
is like, oh, and
Of
can you
course.
make another quick 1-minute thank you? And oh, and here's some George R. R. Martin scholars. Let's make a 1-minute video about that. Oh, here.
Oh, for
For the big gala, the
Yeah, yeah.
scholarship gala. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And I've already got like 2 other documentaries I'm working on.
Oh, she's a filmmaker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she's been helping. It's just insanity. And it all happened in July.
Yeah.
And then it all happened as well when everybody that I was working for in June decided not to pay me.
Oh, that's.
So it was like, oh great, I'm gonna work my ass off and not get paid by anybody for like a month.
Well, that's the great thing about this gig is I get paid. I
On
get
the
paid
regular?
like proposal. They gave me half of it ahead of time, and
Oh
half
my
of it
God.
my proposals due.
That's like a dream job.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Can't beat
And
that.
then so what we do is the proposals due September 15th. They put it out to publishers to see who wants to buy it.
Mhm.
And if the advance is good, I'll make a ton of money. If the advance is not good, I'll make very much.
Well, I just found out from Cherie that my agent is like the most feared looking candidate.
Oh, really?
Nobody likes to deal with her because she's such a hard ass.
Huh.
Because she basically just, this last time I talked to her, after she didn't get back to me for 6 months, told me, this thing's horrible, go back to her. That was her feedback to me.
But when she gets the book, she's okay. I mean, she's video taking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
does well. When she decides she's going to
When she
do it.
decides, yeah, but
Yeah.
like, getting her to do it is one thing, and then when she does it, she responds to you, which is good. Well, you're the one that made me do all those rewrites and
Yeah.
write it that way, and then I do it, and you're like, oh, this is horrible. It's like, yeah, it is horrible. I didn't like the way you did it.
So did you get the, what happened? Did she give you notes or she just
She didn't give me
put
notes.
it back?
You know, she told me to take it back
back?
to IAIA. That's what she told me. And I was like, take it back where?
Yeah.
You know, like, you already messed it up. You made me change the ending, and now I changed the beginning. And now you
I know
want me
you
to put it
did.
in a different order.
Ah.
I'm like, what the heck?
But
So,
you,
it's
but
like,
you did.
that's-
You made another one.
I did another one, and I put it all in chronological order.
Uh-huh.
Because
Okay.
before I would jump around.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, you can't understand it, lady. Okay, I'm gonna put it in chronological order, the right order. I hate chronological
Yeah.
order. I bet it works.
Yeah.
I bet she likes it.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, ugh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I'm one of those.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
All right, it's gonna be ready. It's gonna be ready in about a month, I think. It's so
When I
close.
wrote the rest of this stuff out.
A 4K camera, oh my god. All the streaming software.
Yeah.
It's good, folks. But anyway.
So they're still using the same old mics in here, huh?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's his streaming mic.
Jason's got all the
It's
fancy
fancy.
stuff.
He's got all the fancy stuff. We have all the like the red stuff. Low res. Personified. see a lot from up there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Really great.
Thank
Really
you,
happy
thank
about
you.
it.
Awesome.